So before we do our final sanding, I want to jump us ahead to step 41 in the instructions and make up the stern post. The reason being, and it's not made clear in the instructions at the sanding stage here, that we've got to get 2 layers of planking that is going to tuck behind the stern post. And that means our planking can't be wider than the width of the stern post at the stern. We need to have our first planking sanded down so there is enough depth for the second layer of planking to go over the top of it. So that's really important. If we don't get that right now at the first sanding stage, then that's potentially going to give us problems in the second planking stage. So what I want to do is build up the stern post so that we can use that as a guide to understand whether we've got this section of the sanding thin enough before we put the second planking on. So this isn't clear in the instructions, so it's really important that we do this. Otherwise, what will happen is at this point here, it'll be too wide and you'll put your stern post in and you'll be able to see the first planking behind it, and then you're in a world of hurt. You're having to strip back the plank, 2 layers of planking. You're going to have to purchase more material to do it. So we need to make sure we get this right to start with. So let's make up the stern post. We can follow the instructions here, and then we can use that to ensure that we've got everything as we need to at the back. So let's make that up. Okay, that's our 3 parts. We also need a locking tab. So we clean off the tabs in the normal way. With part 65, we want to just take the laser scorch off on the shorter width, because that's the bit that's going to be visible through the slot. So easier to do that now, then we're not doing any abrasive against the finished surface of these parts. So just a medium grit wet and dry for this task. It doesn't need to be wet and dry, it's just what I'm using. There we go, that will do. Okay, so that's our centerpiece, and we've got our 2 wider pieces, and we can clean up the laser scorch after fitting, so we don't need to do that now. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to put the glue on, we're going to level her like that, and then we can clamp it together while she dries, like so. So yeah, after you're happy that you've test fitted it and everything's okay, we can get these parts glued together. So I'm going to put a small amount of glue on the centerpiece. And that obviously that will spread as we put our top piece on. Let's get that lined up. And then we can put our little location tab in. There we go. That's all good. And then we can put a bit of glue exactly the same again on this side. Clean up any excess. And then we'll just clamp it. You might need to go around and sort any glue again. And then once dried, we can very gently sand that back flush. It's flush on this side, so just the one side to sort out. Just go around it, particularly at the top here. Check that you're happy that it's all flush and aligned and everything's in order. Okay, so we can let that dry and give it half an hour, tidy it up, and then we can use that for setting our width at the stern of our first planking. Just going to go in, we've got these three little gaps here. Make sure there's no glue in them because we're going to be putting in the rudder into here, no doubt. Okay, there we go. We can leave that to dry for a bit. Okay, so we've got all our various parts on being test fitted. So nothing here is glued in. We've got our stern post on. We've got our planking at the keel there. Sorry, at the transom there. We've got our keel on as well. And what we can see is we've got a nice gap all the way around. When we get to this part here, the first planking is pretty much even with the level of the stern post, which means when we put our second planking on, it's going to go over the stern post, and we don't want that. We want it to be flush with the stern post. Now, it doesn't have to be 100% flush. When we lay the planking, we can sand that down. But the less sanding we have to do, the better. Now, quite often on a kit, the keel template that we first put the bulkheads into is often thinned down, but the instructions don't tell us to do that. So we need to do the thinning down at this stage. And what we need to do is thin down from the point that our planking piece finishes, so that's about here, round to about here. So if we follow that curve, all of this area here needs to be thinned down so that we can tuck level with the keel. So we need to put like a chamfer on and gradually blend into there. And we need to thin this down and gradually bend there so that the plank will naturally lie correctly into there and level with there. So that's the next thing that we have got to do. That is then the last thing that we have to do in terms of sanding. So we're going to have to do that on both sides. If you've got a mechanical sander like a mouse or something like that that's not got too abrasive a grit on, that can save you a little bit of time, but be very, very careful. I'm going to be using a little belt sander for this. So this is, as you can see, a Proxon belt sander, and it's got a nice narrow belt on it, and that should do the job fairly quickly. But as always with mechanical tools, you can take a lot of material away very quickly, which is helpful but also can give you a problem. So be very, very careful. Start at that edge and work your way out, and then finish it by hand if you're going to use a mechanical tool. Okay, so this is the Proxon LU6868 Wecker. I guess that means in German. It's an excellent tool, and I highly recommend one if you're going to be building more wooden ships in the future. But if you're doing it by hand, again, start at this point. We're putting a chamfer on here and we're thinning this down and blending it all in to our hull shape. So there you go, we are thinned down now. You can see we're a fraction of thickness of the planking here, but that means that we can put our stern post on and tuck our second planking behind it with no problem whatsoever. And we've also thinned this line down so that we can have a nice chamfer and gentle planking shape. So when you are happy that you can fit all of these outer parts and your second planking is going to fit around it and you've tested everything, that's the point where we can carry on with our next step in the instructions, which is step 33. So I recommend when we fit these that we put that in and that we are doing a little bit of placing work with some other parts just to make sure we're happy with the placement of them. The instructions are asking us to cover them in masking tape. I'm not going to do that, I've got to be honest, because we're going to be applying the second planking using CA glue, and we don't want the CA glue getting between the masking tape and the surface. So I'm not going to do the masking tape bit. It's up to you if you wish to. Right, so let's move on. There we go. Making sure it's tightly against that bit of keel post there. There we go. And we can leave that to dry. So we can now carefully put these pieces around here. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the bow piece here, put the prow in like so. We've got some pegs to put in, so let's get those cut out and cleaned up, and then we can do that as we go. Note that this overlaps that, so you don't need to worry about filling the gap. Okay. I am, however, going to protect these prow pieces with masking tape, just to make sure that we have no sanding or anything like that that ends up going over the nice detail work we've got on those parts. So now we've got that covered in tape, we can just go round with our knife and cut out the shape, being careful not to damage the part. There we go. So make sure you've got no masking tape that could get stuck on the glue. I've got a little bit there where it's sort of folded over. So if we fold that back out, we can then trim from the other side. There we go. There you go, like that. So we don't want anything that could get caught in the glue and end up making a mess. Okay, nice. So that can now be clamped on. We know it's all protected. No issues. Before I forget, you do need to cut out the area where we're going to be putting these little tabs. So I'm now actually going to gently peel this off, and we'll put it back on after we've installed it. So we can just stick that on something out of the way so that we've got it to hand when we need it. Okay, I have done the other side, so just applying a little bit of adhesive onto the part. Like so. So I'm just going to put a little bit on this bottom piece here. Okay, and then we can carefully align over the little alignment tabs. You have to be a little bit watchful of this. There's a bit of play in this end here, so it'll move around a little bit. So I'm just putting a nail through just to make sure that we've got a clear passage. And then we can clamp that together like so. Put our next clamp here. go. Obviously that's oozing glue into our gap, so we need to take that out while this is still damp. So we'll start with a little bit of tissue and get the worst of it out. Like so. And then we can get in with our number 11 blade and just get those small amounts out that we can't get to with the tissue, and make sure that everything's nice and clear for the second planking when we come to do that. Make sure that our little tab is pushed all the way through. There we go. And then we can run a little nail through our holes there to clear them. Can also run a drill through later on if we need to, but doing it now just makes it a bit easier. Make sure that our holes are cleared in the horseshoe. There we go. Wipe away any excess glue that we've got. And then once again here at the top we can just run our nail through and clear any glue before it dries and sets and causes us a bigger problem than we need. So that's our prow pieces on, and we'll do exactly the same with this lower one. Glue it in, put it over the pegs, clamp it down, remove the excess glue. So I'll do that off camera. Our next task is to get this edge here on these parts that we've put in smooth in line with this, so that the planking that we lay on top of this can go over the edge of this. So we can simply do that with a flat file and just slowly take it back. And you can use an off-cut of plank to lay across it if you want to just check. There we go. So that's in line. There is going to be a small gap, but we can adjust that when we're test fitting our planks if we need to. So just putting a bit of a chamfer on, so we've got this nice smooth edge. It's as simple as that. And when you think that you've got a plank that lies straight flat on this surface and goes over the top of that, that's when your job is done. Right, our next parts out are these, which are our outer planking for the top part of the hull where the gunport patterns have been placed. So we have to be a bit careful with these. It's 0.8 thick this sheet, and although pear is a very hard wood, it can be brittle as well, so we do have to handle it with care. Plus we don't want to scuff the outside surface, especially if we choose not to paint the upper works. So that's the first one out. One of the reasons that pear is chosen is it has a very tight wood grain, which gives you a better scale effect than other woods such as walnut that is commonly used in kits from decent brands. So yeah, I like the pear a lot, to be honest. Right, there we go. So I'm going to clean the tabs up, then I'll come back to you. So we are on step 38 now. And in the instructions they say you can either glue this in place now, or you can clamp it in place temporarily and then glue it into place after you've done the painting of the lower hull. And I understand the thinking behind that, which is to make sure you don't get any paint on this, because this is really nicely presented part and we want to preserve it. However, I am going to glue mine into place. What they don't really explain though is how to go about that. You have to scroll down to step 47 to get the instructions, and they are saying clamp it in place and you use some PVA. We're going to do something slightly different to make it a bit easier, and we're going to use a combination of PVA and CA to install this. What we're going to do is we're going to clamp it on first to get its shape. Here's one I did earlier, and then we're going to take it off, and once it's dry, glue it on. Now I say dry because what we're going to do is we're going to soak the front part of this that's going to go around the curve of our hull, so that it doesn't fracture when we bend it. It's quite a tight turn here. If you look at that, it's quite a tight turn, and it can be a bit brittle pear, and what we don't want is it to start to break at this point here, where it's thinner. We could get a fracture at this corner or this corner, and also where we've got these two holes, and we've got this lasered line going through, that's also a weak point. So you could snap it in that direction, and you could snap it there, you could snap it there. So what we want to do is to make this a little bit more malleable, and what if we clamp it into place when it's wet and leave it there as it dries, it will hold into place, and that'll be a lot easier for gluing on. But before we soak it in water, we need to check that we can fit this front edge into here. So we've got a little slot here that it's going to fit into, and it goes in at the top nicely, but here at the bottom I can't quite get it in, so I need to take a bit of material off the back there so it'll slot in, and we need to do that before we start getting it wet. It's easier to file and sand dry wood. And the other reason we're doing this now is because when we soak this, it will swell, so we won't be able to put it in the slot when it's soaked. So you might be thinking, well, your curve won't be right. Well, it'll be as good as, trust me. So we need to make this fit so that we can line up with those holes. So I think we're nearly there, it just needs to be a little thinner.
and it's only this edge. There we go. That fits in now. I'm happy that's tucking in. I don't want to press that down anymore because I want to soak it first. So we'll put it in a little bit of water and just leave it there for a couple of minutes. So we only need to soak up to that gun port opening there. Now obviously this part can twist in more than one way, so you might find when you put this on that it kicks out a little bit. So I'll show you what I mean. So you might get it into there and get it all lined up, and then find here it's kicking out and kicking away from the hull, and you've got a gap where this is kicking out a little bit. Well, because it's wet, you can clamp that down. So you've got to go around and make sure that this is fitting tightly against this substrate that we've already got on against the gun port pattern, and that it's sandwiched without any gaps. That's what we're looking for. So I haven't switched the camera off since I put this into soak, so we can just have a go. I think we'll leave it a couple of minutes and let that have a good soak and soften up. We don't want to leave it too long because it does open up the grain a little bit as well, although tends to be less of a problem on pear than on some other woods. But what we want is for it to be soft and malleable so that we can clamp it into shape. So this bit here needs a bit more of a soak. I think we're all right at the front. So I'm just going to hold it in with my finger for a moment. So you'll need some of these clamps. These will do for the majority of it, but be handy to have a couple of these larger clamps to hand as well, just to make sure that you're fitting tightly at the bottom as well as the top. Now, then we'll leave that to dry, and then what we will do is, because it's all fitting nicely, we will either put wood glue on the full surface and clamp it back on, or we'll do some CA at the front. And in fact, CA will bond wood better when the wood is a bit damp. So if you wanted to, you could put glue onto this now and clamp it in place and just leave it to dry and harden, and that would work. Right, let's see if we are ready. So I'm just going to get that out of the way. So first thing we want to do is just check that we've got enough bend in this. I think we're going to be okay. So we're going to plop that in at the front and line up those holes. We can put our first clamp on. Now we're only clamping this for shape at this moment in time, so it doesn't matter if it's not perfectly aligned. We'll do that when we come to glue it. Because as I look at this, those holes are slightly off, so we're not perfectly aligned, but I'm not going to worry about it. Right, and I can see that's kicking out a little bit just there. Can you see the gap? So I'm just going to put a clamp on it here that's a bit longer and can reach to the bottom there. Just to push that in. There we go. And I'm going to put another one on there. There we go. Just swapping my clamps because they're getting in between these ones better. There we go. And if you look at that there, you can see that's pulling away a little bit on that edge. So we'll clamp that as well. We want it absolutely sandwiched tightly. There we go. So we'll leave that on, let that dry, and then we should be in a much better position when we come to glue it. We'll be able to put it in, and it's not going to fight you quite so much as it would have done if you hadn't given it a soak and pre-shaped it. So there you go, that's our next step. Easy enough to do. Take your time, get yourself prepared before you start it, get all your clamps to hand, your water ready, and then just get in and do it. So just remember, you can't sand this, you can only sand the decking. So you need to make sure that it's fitting exactly as you want it to. Nice and tight.
Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't done so. It's free, and if you'd like to support the channel, you can hit my PayPal link in the text below. Every pound goes straight into the channel to keep the cameras rolling and to do more fun stuff for you to watch.